all. Thank you for joining on this Thursday evening, which is unusual. Normally we meet on Monday evenings, but I think that Peggy's been trying to coordinate this meeting for some time. And so we're happy to have our guests and speakers on whatever night works out well for everyone. Um, I'm Sarah Wilson. I'm the chair of the Lower Hudson Group for Sierra Club, which covers Rockland, Westchester, Putnam, and southern part of Orange County, Sierra Club members and supporters. We're also partnering this evening with Rockland Audubon Society, with whom we partnered on events in the past. Also the Mid-Hudson Sierra Club Group, and ROAR, which is religious organizations along the river. The river, of course, being our Hudson River. So I want to thank all of our partner organizations, and again, especially Rockland Audubon. So without any further ado, I would ask you all to stay on mute. Feel free to put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them either at a reasonable stopping point during Dustin's presentation or at the end, however it best works out. Dustin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all for having me tonight. When Christine and Peggy asked me to join this, I was particularly happy because I'm from Rockland County. I grew up in Rockland County. My love of nature comes from spending my childhood hiking in Harriman and crossing the river to Westchester, and just the amazing wildlife and nature that is all around Rockland County has been my inspiration for so long. So of course I jumped at the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you for switching nights. I know that you usually meet on Mondays, but Mondays I teach. Monday nights I teach at Columbia, and I wasn't able to reschedule that class. So thanks for bearing with me on the switch. As a brief introduction, I am Dustin Partridge. I am currently the Director of Conservation and Science at New York City Bird Alliance, which is a chapter of National Audubon. We're our own independent 501c3 organization, just like the Sierra Club and Rockland Audubon here. What makes us kind of unique is that we are a staff chapter. We have about 17 staff members at this point, and we have a very strong focus in science. So my work that I do on a day-to-day, I'm lucky enough to oversee a team of scientists. We're doing science research across New York City to help protect birds and biodiversity. My background, I've spent time working all across the place, from studying dolphins in Florida Keys to banding birds in Maine. And then I ended up getting my doctorate in biology at Fordham, where I studied the conservation value of green roofs. So how does biodiversity find its way to green roofs, which we're going to talk a little bit about, buildings that are covered with vegetation, and how does a community, ecological community, form there? But today I'm going to talk about bird conservation and why birds matter. And it's an incredibly interesting place to be doing work on bird conservation because, sorry, I'm going to hide something. It's an incredibly interesting place to be doing bird conservation because it's really so important here. We're working in a metropolis that extends up through the Hudson Valley, this incredibly dense area that is biodiversity rich. And I'm going to share about what we're doing and ways that you all could help make changes to protect biodiversity, specifically around birds. Now, you should have asked before I shared my screen, but if you could like show me by hands, how many of you are with Sierra Club? Or if you have the little thing on the bottom, you can react. Curious the split between Sierra Club versus Rockland Audubon. Okay, it's helpful. All right. Yeah, so I'm gonna introduce a bit about birds and kind of why they matter, because I realize that there are some diehard birders in the room, and then others that may not be as well versed in birds. But this is one that you all know, right? You've all seen this blue jay. You've probably saw it today if you went outside at all. Very common bird, beautiful, incredible in so many different ways. But it's a really good example of why birds are so important. So you've probably seen if, the snow just melted and these birds are out digging through the yard trying to find acorns. One of the things that's amazing about blue jays is that they forage on acorns and they're smart enough to stash them for the winter. So they go out and they bury these acorns, seeds of massive oak trees. They pick them off the ground, fly them a few hundred yards to a mile, and bury them underground, essentially planting them. Over the winter, they go back to find their food, and a small percentage of them, they forget where they planted them. And what they're essentially doing is they're help spreading oak forests. When there's a clearing, when something gets washed out, when a forest burns, blue jays are one of the primary sources of replanting that oak forest. They're incredibly important. There's this vital connection in our ecosystems and allow for the incredible forests that we have throughout the Hudson Valley. And these birds are just one of many birds that are out there and have these incredible connections. They're so important. In fact, there's estimated that the movement north of oak trees since last glaciation is largely due to blue jays and moving them north at about a mile a year. So it's just this incredible bird that's right in front of us, and it's just one connection that's available to understand. And birds have an impact. So these birds are important, right? So if everybody in this room is interested in birds and nature, and you're not alone, right? So the recent study by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, it came out last year, shows that 3 in 10 Americans are birders. 37% of the U.S. population, they're birders. So we're kind of everywhere. People enjoy it. You don't have to be it's not a rare thing to go outside and see something that's beautiful and find how shocking it is and want to look deeper. And it's not just that. So it's not just that people get connected to nature, people find their way to environmentalism and protecting nature through birds, but they also help us a lot. So, for example, this is a black crowned night heron sitting on a nest in the harbor in New York Harbor. And this bird is a biological indicator. So this bird is essentially, and I'll talk more about it in a little bit, but this bird tells us when something is going wrong in the ecosystem, just like many birds. When there's a problem, when there's some chemical that's in the system, or some failure of a part of the system, birds respond first. Their population declines, show what's happening to us. And when you work to protect birds, you're also working to protect the planet. So birds are this incredible form of wildlife that's everywhere that people can connect with, and they do a lot for us. So they help us fight climate change, right? These birds that are starting to migrate through right now, tonight, there are birds migrating overhead that were in the tropics not too long ago. While they're in the tropics, they were doing things just like the blue jay, planting seeds in forests, spreading grasslands, helping us to fight climate change. Those ecosystem services, just like as the birds move through, if you have a garden in your backyard, the birds are going to be the ones that are help clearing off those pesky insects that are infesting it. So birds do a lot for us. They're also important for ecotourism and business development. I'll give a case of that towards the end. People want to travel and pay for birding and to see wildlife. They're also good for human health and well-being. Whether or not you're a birder, if you go outside into a green space when you're stressed, if you feel that stress, you go outside and you hear birds, you feel better. You don't have to know what the birds are. If you feel more of them, if you hear more of them, you feel better. That's been scientifically supported. When we're around birds, we are just feeling better. We're doing better as humans. And of course, when you're looking at the lens of birds and bird conservation, we're thinking about birds. We're going to talk about birds today, but the benefits to birds extend to all of the habitats that they touch, all of the species that they're near. And I'm very conservation focused. The way I approach my work is I use science to have a conservation impact. And birds absolutely have a conservation impact far beyond just looking at birds. But this becomes a challenge because birds are in decline. This is a New York Times article from last week. This actually just published last week, showing that not only are birds in decline, but the decline is happening faster and faster. So birds are rapidly being lost. We've lost 1 in 4 birds since 1970, about 3 billion birds. If you were in Rockland County in the 70s, when you woke up in spring, it probably sounded a lot louder than it does now. This is having an impact. And this decline is for a number of reasons. It's habitat loss, right? Shoreline habitats, development, urban sprawl, that's causing losses. It's overuse of insecticides in agricultural areas or just growing agricultural areas. It's causes of mortality like cats or outdoor cats or windows, which are a major killer we're going to talk about. It's climate change and shifting habitats. There are so many threats that birds are facing right now, and it's really signaling, it's causing them to decline and signaling to us that something is wrong. But we're going to talk about our area, right? The Hudson River Valley down to New York City, because it's not only is it an important place to be working, but it also is a great space to be understanding what's happening to birds across the globe, because we have incredible numbers of birds right here, and the conservation challenges that they're facing here are not unique to New York. They're not unique to this area. They're happening around the globe. The lower Hudson Valley is a biodiversity hotspot. The same reason we all moved here, the biodiverse resources that drove people to this land, are the same things that drive biodiversity here. This is a view of lower Manhattan. So this is Manhattan before European arrival. You notice that there are people here. You can see the smokestacks coming up. But take a look at how many diverse habitats were here. We have wetlands, you have upland forests. You can kind of see the Cuomo Bridge up there where it's going to be in the future. And you have these rich shorelines. There's incredible biodiversity here. And even though this area has changed, what you see on the right, this area still supports incredible biodiversity and patches of green that remain here and in the birds that migrate through every year. And the on that note of um, migration, the lower Hudson Valley is critical habitat. So in New York City alone, at the kind of tail end of the Hudson Valley, we have over 25 million birds moving through every year, right overhead as we're sleeping. Most birds migrate at night. They're moving through, passing overhead. Those birds are moving through New York City. They're moving up through Rockland County, up Westchester, Putnam, all the way along Hudson as they go up. What you see here on the left is an image that was taken using weather radar to track bird migration at night. This is from my colleagues at Birdcast. And one day last fall, October 8th, there were 1.2 billion birds flying overhead. And you can see just how many of them had just passed through Rockland and the lower Hudson. And that's because we're right along the Atlantic Flyway. So it's this historic, essentially a highway for birds that they use to connect between points north and points south, traveling as far as the Tierra del Fuego all the way up to the Arctic every year, back and forth, passing over this area. And just because we built up cities and towns in their path, it doesn't mean they're going to stop. They're going to continue moving through. And that's why New York City and this area is so important for conservation. So for New York City Bird Alliance, again, the organization I work for, we work to protect wild birds and their habitats, strengthening urban biodiversity, and improving the city for all New Yorkers. And the way we're kind of unique is that we have, again, we have this full staff and we have a dedicated focus on science. So we're working on science across the 5 boroughs of New York City to identify and understand what might be harming or benefiting birds across the city. We then connect that with our engaged audience. We have over 400 outings a year. Most of them are free, and we engage tens of thousands of people in events every year, and they're super excited. Birding is having a moment right now. People are loving going out and seeing nature. And then we advocate for change. We connect this science with this engaged audience, and we advocate for change in New York City. And it's one of the ways that New York City has some of the most comprehensive bird safe legislation in the entire nation. It's this process of science to an engaged audience to advocacy. But oftentimes, when I introduce myself and the role that I have as the director of conservation and science, people are asking, okay, well, how do you do conservation science in New York City? That's what we're going to talk a bit about today. And this is it. This is conservation science in New York City. It comes down to protecting the largest waterbird colonies in the Northeast. Our islands and our shorelines are covered with nesting wading birds, more so than anywhere else in the Northeast. In fact, this oyster catcher here that you see, we band and track them. The oyster catchers, the 60% of the entire state's population lives in New York City. It's a great place to be working. We also do a lot of work to reduce bird collisions with buildings. We're going to talk about why that happens and why it's such a big deal in a few. And then we're going to end talking about creating habitat with green infrastructure. What happens when you take an area that's otherwise impervious surface, something like asphalt or a rooftop, and you plant it as habitat like what you see here. So I was thinking about this region, and this is the area that I spend most of my time working, and the river that connects us, right? This is the Hudson River here. So I want to start out by talking about our harbor, New York Harbor, and the estuary, which extends up through the lower Hudson Valley. This is all part of this incredible estuary that has incredible resources. For a moment, we're going to focus on these lost islands throughout the harbor. These two little dots down here, Hoffman and Swinburne. You have North and South Brother Island over here, the islands of Jamaica Bay. These islands are teeming with life, but it wasn't always like that. This is a view of New York Harbor in 1880. So this is a painting done by 1880 looking at New York Harbor, and you can see how much pollution and how much habitat was lost. In 1880, before the Clean Water Act was passed, the river was a dumping ground. You all know this if you're close by the river, if you spent any time in the river, you know the history that has happened in this area. And there used to be incredible islands or incredible shorelines that were just teeming with life and wading birds, nesting wading birds. But after the Industrial Revolution, these nesting wading birds, birds like egrets, black-crowned night heron, great egret, um, uh, great blue heron, they disappeared. The water got too bad, too contaminated, and they left. By the 1930s, there were no nesting wading birds left in New York Harbor. But legislation works. When you pass legislation that protects the environment, it makes a big difference. And the Clean Water Act was passed in 1972. Shortly after the Clean Water Act passed, wading birds returned to New York Harbor for the first time. They came back and they started nesting on all of these lost islands throughout the harbor. And my predecessors, 40 years ago, began going out. They saw these birds come back. The first were reported in the late 70s. And in 1983, my predecessors went out to count the first colony that was found, which was right here off of Staten Island at Shooter's Island. And then, since 1985, every year since, we've gone out and conducted a count of the islands in the harbor, tracking every single nesting wading bird, like this black-crowned night heron here, counting their nests and counting their young. And New York City now has the largest remaining wading bird population in the Northeast. There's nothing else like this. Right near the Lower Hudson Valley is where the majority of these birds in the Northeast now nest. And you can see a view here. This is not some faraway place. This isn't Maine or Cape Cod. This is the South Bronx. And this is an incredible spot. This is South Brother Island. And for those of you, I know there's a lot of birders in the room, but I wanted to go ahead and circle all of the nesting pairs that you could see here. All of these birds are nesting here in the South Bronx. It's the largest remaining bird population in the wading bird population in the Northeast, right here sharing our waterways. It's why protection of the Hudson is so important to protect these birds. But we recently conducted a recent analysis of our last 40 years of data because we started noticing this decline. We did this in-depth analysis. Waterbird data is challenging. The data of a long data set, there's a lot of up and downs, but we wanted to see actually what was going on. What we uncovered was a bit alarming. The wading birds of New York, New Jersey harbor of our estuary are disappearing. We found a 27% decline of nesting pairs of the 10 species that nest out there. We found a 27% decline in the last 20 years. Now, we were curious if this decline is due to all species declining or individual species. And what we found is that the most common bird in the entire estuary, most common wading bird, the black-crowned night heron, is what's leading these declines. The black-crowned night heron, that indicator species, that bioindicator, that has historically been the most abundant bird in the Northeast, in these waterways, has lost 55% of its population in 20 years. This is alarming. We found this, and we're happy that we discovered it, but it certainly sets us into overdrive to try to protect this bird. Because what we next did is we projected this decline forward. We wanted to see, okay, well, how long do we actually have until these birds are at serious risk? Because as you can see here, how many nesting pairs have disappeared in just the last 20 years. And I'm sure that if you are a long-term birder in this area, you've probably noticed this too. Black-crowned night herons just 20 years ago were far more common. And what we found with our projection is that without conservation action, black-crowned night heron will be locally extinct as soon as 2037. This nesting population that exists in New York Harbor is disappearing. But the key thing here is that without conservation action. So what you're going to be seeing from us, and what I'm hoping to engage you all to do, is a dedicated push to conserve this bird and protect our waterways to save this bird. Because this is a biological indicator. This bird is telling us something's wrong. And it's not just New York, New Jersey harbor. So what you see on the right here, is trends or black-crowned night heron observations between 2012 and 2022 across the Northeast. You can see Rockland up here, or the Lower Hudson here. And what you see is that these birds aren't simply leaving New York to go somewhere north or inland. These birds are actually disappearing. And if we lose the largest remaining population, a source population, that means the entire Northeast population is at risk. And this isn't good because I'm sure some of you in this room had a connection with a water bird, a black-crowned night heron, right? It's often a spark bird. It's the bird that gets people interested in him because you don't have to be a birder to know that a 3 foot tall, odd-looking football dinosaur is something special. These birds are incredibly important for connection with people. They also are important ecologically. So the reason that these colonies exist in New York Harbor is these birds can pull other birds in. They're noisy when they're nesting, and they let other mixed species know. There are 10 species that nest on the islands of the harbor, and they all come in part because of the incredible numbers of black-crowned night heron, but they're in decline. And the way that we're thinking about this is they're bioindicators. These birds are the canary in the coal mine. So all of the work that you're doing in the lower Hudson to protect the Hudson River, to protect this estuary, is going to help this bird because these birds are signaling that something is wrong. When there's some contaminant in the river, when there's some contaminant in their system, what happens with these birds, has been shown through science, is their young just fail to thrive. They don't fledge. They end up with sores on them and they die in the nest. And it's because these birds are top predators. They're out there foraging and sampling throughout the harbor, letting us know that basically if something's present, they're not going to do well. And this is an alarm. So this is why we are so focused on protecting this bird. And hopefully, if we can protect this bird, we can protect ourselves. So we are setting out a call to action to save the black-crowned night heron. Our organization is kicking off a whole bunch of new scientific research to understand the exact drivers of this decline. We're going to be messaging about it. We encourage you to share the messaging, and maybe have some guided outings near the river looking for black-crowned night herons. See what you can find. And then, of course, advocacy is going to be a big part of this. The black-crowned night heron are not a listed species in New York State. They're listed in nearby states like New Jersey and other points north, but they're not listed in New York State. So when the endangered species list gets reassessed in 2 years, I hope that you all will join us in advocating to get these birds listed as an endangered species list. Because even though they are incredibly abundant and the most abundant wading bird in New York Harbor, they are at risk of extirpation as soon as 2037. This sounds scary, but our early discovery will prevent this extirpation. We found it soon enough that we can actually save this bird, especially if we all work on this together. But I want to switch gears here again and now look back out. So let's get on the water for a little bit and let's look at the common theme that you see here. And even as you look up to the lower Hudson, until you get some of the more remote areas, there's a lot of buildings here. This is a whole built area, the entire Hudson Valley, and New York City has been dedicated to really human development for the last several hundred years. And we have this sprawl of the built environment. And what that results in is this, and I apologize for not giving you a warning about this hard image, but over 1 billion birds die in building collisions in the US every year. This is one of the leading causes of bird deaths, of direct bird mortality, with collisions with glass windows. This is not just a city problem. This is an image of this is not just a city problem. This happens everywhere throughout the lower Hudson Valley. But what you're seeing here is 1 day of collision monitoring in lower Manhattan. This was a mass collision event, and our volunteers who go out and use a scientifically standardized survey to collect information on collisions, they found this. This is what they found across one set of buildings down at the World Trade Center. This is scary. This is alarming, but what's nice about this is one of those big environmental challenges that absolutely has a very easy solution. And this solution works incredibly well. So to solve this, to stop these collisions from happening, you really need to understand two things. The first is that light attracts and disorients birds. So birds migrate at night. Most birds that migrate at night. Right now, they're probably flying over our heads. And they evolved to migrate using the moon or stars or the Earth's magnetic fields. And then a little over 100 years ago, we invented artificial light at night and we lit the skies, overriding their ability to travel at night. And this has multiple scale impacts. My colleagues, Carolyn Burt and others, put this together to show. At the macro scale, it pulls birds in. Birds will literally change direction and fly towards brightly lit areas. They'll then get disoriented and confused in that brightly lit area, And when there's a local bright light coming from a window, they will collide. This is part of the issue. To demonstrate how powerful light is, I want to show you um, birds migrating at night. So what you're going to see here is thermal imaging footage. So there are now cameras that you can use to look at heat signature. And what you're looking at right now, these things that look like snowflakes falling, those are not snowflakes falling. Those are birds migrating at fall during fall migration over Jamaica Bay. Now, if you notice, this is a normal migration. This is what it looks like overhead during spring and fall, right over the lower Hudson Valley. And you can see these birds moving, kind of a slow, steady stream heading south or north, depending on right now they're heading south, but in the spring they're heading north. This is normal migration. Again, you can see it's kind of a slow, steady movement that's happening. When we first got this camera and we were able to look at this, I got teary-eyed. As you can see, this is near JFK. It's an airplane coming through. But it was incredible to see how many birds are moving overhead as we're sleeping and this powerful movement that's underway. Now I want to show what happens when you brightly light the sky. This is the Tribune Light. So this is a event that happens annually in Lower Manhattan, where to commemorate the lives lost on 9/11, where a large display of lights. You can see them behind me and my colleague Jessica here. These lights are about 4 feet tall or so, and they're so bright that you could easily see them from the Lower Hudson Valley. If you've gone out and you've looked down on 9/11, the night of 9/11, they're lit from sunset to sunrise, and they are there to commemorate lives lost, but they also serve as a beacon for birds, pulling birds in. Um, what we do at New York City Bird Alliance is we work and we have a dedicated team of volunteers. We get there at sunset and we stay there all night long, counting birds all night. And when a critical threshold of birds builds up in the light, we shut the lights out, making sure that it's safe. We ask the light show to be turned off and they clear out right away. Now, think back to that normal migration that you just saw. This is migration in the beams. These are all birds stuck in those beams. This is not normal. This is bad. This shows how powerful light is. These birds are stuck going in all sorts of directions. You can see the kind of disarray that's here as they're literally stuck because of the artificial light at night overpowering their ability to migrate. Well, what we discovered using this and what we do and when we were there is when birds build up to a threshold like this, we shut lights out. And within about 50 seconds, all the birds are gone. It doesn't take much for lights to go out to have birds go back to normal migration. And when a bird is traveling for thousands of miles between North and South America, you want to make sure that this bird does not get disrupted by artificial light at night. You want to keep them clear and having a normal migration so that they can get to the ground safely. The first part of this problem of reducing collisions with windows is turn off lights at night. The power of artificial light on nighttime habitat can't be understated. This has impacts far beyond birds. It impacts moths and nesting birds and other nocturnal animals. Even plants are impacted by artificial light at night. So if you can turn lights off at night, you will be able to reduce the risk of collisions and also have tremendous other benefits. You can see here, just by turning off some of your lights, you can reduce collision risk with large buildings. And this is getting more and more attention. This is kind of a new field of science. If you go look at one of the most recent Smithsonian articles, you'll see some really great coverage of how the life in the air is functioning, how the night sky is habitat. But again, brightly lit areas tend to come around cities or downtowns, and that concentrates risk. But now the real risk comes from unprotected glass. If you're a bird flying hundreds of miles at night or traveling long distances, when the sun comes up, you want to rest and refuel. You want to find a spot to get into some vegetation, take a break, or find a bunch of insects or berries to eat. And this looks like great habitat. To a bird, that is habitat. To us, who have grown up around glass, know that these lines in the glass are there to indicate that there's glass there. We know that it's glass. A bird does not share that benefit. A bird does not understand that that reflection is glass. So when you have reflective glass, that reflective glass is killing birds. This is a photo from Ramapo College, actually, just outside of the Lower Hudson in Bergen County. But campuses like this are everywhere. Glass is all over the place. This is a problem with houses. It's a problem with campuses. It is a problem across the world. And urban areas concentrate risks, but collisions are not just a city problem. So you can see how this is Hudson Yards. This is an area that's recently built up in the city. You can see how if there's bright lights here, it pulls birds into this area, and then there's a network of glass. And you can see that glass is challenging here. There's a railing here you can't even see. There's fly-through here, fly-through conditions meaning it's invisible glass. There's some reflections, and this is lethal to birds. But what's important to note is that high rises, the things people often think are the major cause of collisions, only account for 1%, less than 1% of the total number of collisions. Most collisions happen at residences and low-rise buildings. This is not just a city problem. This is something we can solve. And to kind of show how you make glass birds safe, I'm going to show you how we make glass humans safe. So if you take a close look, there are these 10s on the building here. You see these 10s? This is to kind of indicate the address of the building. But if you notice, it's adult head height and kid head height. These 10s are not here to let people know the address of the building. It's there to stop people from walking into glass. This same idea, this letting observer know that there's a barrier present, can be extended to birds and prevent collisions. So to protect birds, make glass visible to birds. There are an incredible number of products. You don't have to replace glass. You just have to put a film on it with a pattern that's spaced out about 2 inches by 2 inches. This is an example in Lower Manhattan where there was a deadly gangplank to a ferry terminal. You can see the birds built up on the bottom here. We brought this to Port Authority and they fixed the glass. They put this pattern on top of it on the exterior surface, and it let birds know that a barrier was present and they were no longer collided. This is an example of feather-friendly film. It works great for homes. We could talk more about that at the end, but it's a great product. Now, important to note is that if you have one of those Raptor decals in a window, unfortunately, those don't work. Birds are really good at flying through tight spaces, and they know that that's just a barrier there. It stops them prevents them from crashing in that one spot. But unless there is a signal to them that something is present every 2 inches by 2 inches, they're going to collide. But again, this is easily solvable. Make glass visible, and you can stop collisions. Now, something that you all could do locally that would help understand the scale of collision problems. As you can see, this is dBird. So we created a website called dbird.org, and this is the place that you can go to report local bird collisions. So if talking through this, you started thinking about your own home or a nearby building where you've seen dead birds outside the glass, you can report that. It takes less than 2 minutes. You can go on your phone, go to dbird.org and enter a photo and document the brief information here. You don't need to sign up for anything. You don't need to give your email. Just document your information. And you can see that collisions are a problem everywhere. But now let's switch to the last part that we were going to talk about, the green infrastructure. So one of the things that you can do when you're looking at this and you're looking whether at New York City or the Lower Hudson, you see a lot of gray. So these buildings aren't going anywhere. And we can improve parks and existing green spaces, but what if you could convert some of this gray into green? And that's why we do spend a lot of time looking at places like this. This is the Bronx County Courthouse. This is a typical roof in most cities or most towns. And we're curious what happens when you turn a roof from this into this, and how this can provide habitat for these birds that are migrating incredible distances. This is the same building, just opposite sides of the roof. And you can see right away that this is a high quality or interesting habitat for wildlife that can offer a solution. And rather than going into a deep dive in the science, I'm going to talk about one example at the Javits Center that kind of takes all of this information and puts it into one building. So the Javits Center, which I suspect that many of you have been to or heard of, this is New York's largest convention center, one of the largest convention centers in the nation. It used to be one of the biggest bird killers in New York City. So this was the building around 2010 when it had this black reflective glass, and it was killing between 4,000 and 5,000 birds a year. So as these birds would collide with this glass, they would build up outside. The neighborhood did not like this building. They referred to it as Darth Vader because of the appearance and its bird killing nature. And we were monitoring this. This is before I was with the organization, but we were monitoring this building for collisions. We ended up working with the Javits Center to get change put in place. And what happened was incredible. So Javits Center was able to go through and replace every single one of those lethal panes of glass with bird-friendly glass. All this glass that you see here now is bird-friendly. There's a small dot matrix in the glass that lets birds know that it's present. They also replaced some glass along this here with a wall, and they even went a step further and they installed a green roof, a nearly 7 acre green roof on top of the building, essentially a field on top of the building that was planted with about 1.5 inches of growing media and covered with sedum. In 2014, when this was completed, we went out to see what the impacts of this green infrastructure was. Or was wildlife able to use this at all? And we've continued that since. Now, 20% of New York City's bird species now use this building as habitat. Use is the key word there. They're not colliding with it, they're using it as habitat. Just like you see here with this eastern phoebe, which is a type of flycatcher doing its flycatcher thing. This was taken with a motion sensor camera we deploy on the roof. And this has been incredible to see. This habitat has been covered with birds, and it's now a critical stopover habitat right in Midtown Manhattan. This is 34th Street, between 34th and 40th Street. This large building now provides habitat in a spot where there was no habitat for the last 100 years. And this building went further. It ended up building an expansion, and on that expansion, there's an apple orchard. It has nearly 40 trees on top of the roof and an understory that's lush with native plants, native vegetation, known as the food forest. There's also a farm up here. Javits Center went from a bird killer to bird habitat. This is one of the yellowthroats, common yellowthroats that love foraging through here. You can see it on one of the posts for the tomatoes. And this is different. So the employees that work here now are engaged with birds and biodiversity. Rather than stepping over dead birds to get into the building, you can go out and band birds with us. This green roof that we showed images of before now hosts the largest remaining herring gull colony in the entire region, right here on the Javits Center in the middle of Manhattan, in the middle of New York City. And what you see us doing here is banding birds. So we catch these chicks before they're able to fledge, we put bands on them, and we can track where they're going. If you happen to see a herring gull with an orange band and white lettering on it, it's probably a gull from the Javits Center. It's probably one of the birds that hatched here. I'm certain they're going up through the lower Hudson foraging. You'll probably see them mostly through the winter, though I'm sure they're sticking around through part of the summer as well. And these birds that hatched here are showing up as far south as Tampa, Florida, as far west as Texas, and as far north as Toronto. So this one building in the middle of New York City has had incredible change and is having impact far beyond the borders of New York City. What I also love is that the extension features bird safe glass as a design element. So oftentimes people are afraid of bird safe glass. They don't think it's going to look good. This is what it looks like. Come on, it looks incredible, especially when you're looking out on a green roof over what would otherwise be there. And this is nice because when tens of thousands or millions of people come through this convention center, now they get that firsthand experience with bird safe glass. And this investment has also benefited Javits. So this is some of the recent coverage of the Javits Center. We got into Gothamist, NPR. There's an amazing PBS episode that covers Javits' efforts here that shows just how much biodiversity is on the roof, and we could share this afterward if you want to take a look at it. But it's a good example of how when an organization does the right thing, there are benefits beyond just those the biodiversity. It can actually help get advertising for the building and gets more people and more eyes on it. And this change, all of this change that we've been documenting with science, has led to incredible bird safe design benefits and systemic change throughout New York City. So I mentioned this at the introduction, but New York City has some of the most comprehensive bird safe building legislation in the nation. Passed Local Law 15 in 2020. That requires all new buildings in New York City to be built with bird safe glass in the bottom 75 feet of the building. Going forward, that's going to change the city incredibly. We also have legislation that requires lights out during migration for all city-owned and occupied buildings. And it doesn't just stop there. We also have green roof legislation. So we have requirements that when new buildings are built, they're being built bird friendly. They're also being built with either a solar roof or a green roof on top, one of those vegetated roofs or solar panels. We also have incentives, a green roof tax abatement. This is an abatement that offers a significant tax reduction if you install a green roof on your building. And it gives more money back for areas that have the greatest need for green roofs and priority districts. So this is what has resulted from this bird safe change. This legislation has come and really changed New York City. And it's not just New York City. Just last night, Jersey City, right across the river, passed legislation. Hoboken's up next, and across the world or across the U.S. and Canada, people are looking at New York City's legislation from small municipalities to big cities and getting bird safe legislation in place to protect birds, to stop those collisions from happening, providing habitat through greenery. So we talked a lot about New York City, and this is just one of my favorite views. This is a herring gull nest on top of a building, on top of a green roof, that was that is made with bird safe glass looking out at the city. And if all of this change has happened here in New York City, where there's so many people, so much density, and so much need for conservation, if this change is possible here, change is possible anywhere, everywhere, and anywhere. So I wanted to end with kind of sharing a few different things that you all could do locally to make a difference, because individual action matters. So if you have a garden, if you have any property at all, plant with your garden with native plants. Native plants co-evolved with native insects. And native insects can go to these plants and they'll have more insects on those plants than a non-native plant, an ornamental from Home Depot or Lowe's. And those insects are bird food. You can see here a monarch found its way to a native vine in Lower Manhattan. Yes, that's the World Trade Center behind it. Planting with native plants provides habitat for all sorts of wildlife. And as if you're a homeowner or an apartment owner or you're working in a building with glass, you can make that bird safe. Turn your lights off at night during migration. Exterior lighting, definitely, any upward facing lighting should definitely go off. And then cover your blinds or turn lights off. Just be aware of turning lights out at night and make your windows bird safe. Do something like this. Put a pattern on your window using one of the films that's available or even a paracord and make it an element of the habitat, just like this is here. This is a bird safe windbreak in Lower Manhattan that is now being used as habitat as a perch rather than killing birds. This is something everybody can do and have an immediate effect, especially as migration's underway. And again, help to contribute to science. This is the Christmas bird count. I know Rockland Audubon participates in the Christmas bird count. Go out and collect data. Data makes all of this possible. And by being a community scientist, by taking part in something, you can really have a tremendous impact by giving data that helps us to lead change and helps to make change locally and at systemic levels. And finally, advocate for change. When you raise your voice for the environment, things make a difference. It makes a difference. This herring gull nest, from the largest remaining herring gull colony in the region, is possible because of advocating for change. And if New York City could get bird safe glass legislation in place and get green roof legislation in place, anybody can get that change in place. And when you start connecting data with an engaged audience and advocating for that change to help the environment, just like the Clean Water Act did in the 1970s, you can have a tremendous impact that can then benefit wildlife immediately, but also for future generations. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have. My contact information is here if you'd like to reach out further.
Thank you so much, Dustin. That was really a fascinating presentation. We'll open it up for questions, but I just did want to point out that Lower Hudson Group Sierra Club has been running a series on the crisis of biodiversity over at least the past year. And Peggy Kurtz has been coordinating speakers on a variety of topics associated with this crisis in biodiversity. And last year, I think we partnered with Rockland Audubon on a dark sky presentation and had some great speakers and information. And ultimately, coming out of that program and the advocacy efforts that people engaged in, we were successful in getting the lights turned off at Mario Cuomo Bridge, the Tappan Zee Bridge, which was a great accomplishment, we think.
A huge
So
accomplishment. Yeah, I meant to mention that in the talk. I was remember the view of the bird stuck at the Tribune Light? That's likely what was happening around the Cuomo Bridge, especially with those bright uplighting. So the work that you all were able to get done there to get those lights out, that is incredible. And I think it does set a precedent for the other bridges around the state.
So I will open it up for questions. And I just want to ask first, is there any proposed legislation or pending legislation that you're supportive and that perhaps we should be made aware of? We can put a link on our website, get the word out, et cetera.
Yeah, there is quite a bit of legislation that was in play, at least in the fall, in near at the state level, particularly around lights out legislation for state buildings. Um, and there was also some various legislation about requirements to make buildings bird safe, on incentive programs. A lot of the work that we directly lead is focused on New York City and New York City legislation, which we would be happy to have anybody weigh in on, especially since we're sharing birds, right? The birds moving through New York City are also Lower Hudson birds. But I could also share a lot of the state level legislation that's being championed by New York, Audubon New York. And I will send that through afterward because there's a few pieces that would be particularly powerful.
Okay, great. That would be appreciated, and we'll push that out. I don't see anyone with a hand
Oh,
raised.
wait, me.
Oh, yes.
My hand isn't raised. Let me raise it. So my name
Yeah.
is my name is Jocelyn DiCrescenzo, and I live in Valley Cottage in a kind of a sprawling condo development over which I have no control. So in during the springtime, ranks of so-called gardeners come. We call them land scrapers, and they come and they destroy what exists, what's maybe budding, what might be bird nesting season, and they're coming with their saws and their chainsaws, and they're cutting things, and they're forming these bizarre shapes on bushes like forsythia and other bushes that birds do nest in. And this is during nesting season, and I'm wondering, in Rockland County, is there any way to stop this from happening during nesting and hatching season? I think in England they have laws that prevent this kind of thing from happening. And do you know of any way to make some kind of progress on this? I mean, my
Yeah,
landscapers look at me like I'm crazy because I'm out there, basically screaming my head off over the sound of buzzsaws, telling them to stop. But how do I actually really affect change?
yeah. So I would start with a community group if you can get your neighbors to weigh in and maybe even start with a subset of the habitat. People are often afraid of what unconventional landscaping looks like, right? They expect it to be trimmed hedges and no
Mhm.
leaves on the ground and just mulch. And that does nothing. That's ecologically sterile. So encourage maybe one portion of the area to go with native plants and show that actually saves money. There's no reason for the development to be paying that much money to have people go out there and just leaf blow and cut away all the biodiversity. If you put in native plants, it requires less maintenance, can actually save money, reduce fees for the entire community. So
Mhm.
that's one approach I would take in that case, and that's something that we've done across New York City, where we end up with really incredible habitats, and we also have the benefit of not having deer in much of the city. Um,
Mhm.
the other part would be so for the kind of the legal mechanism, birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So it is actually illegal to move a bird nest or disrupt a bird nest if it's a wild bird, if it's a native bird species. So
Mhm.
if you know there's a robin or a cardinal or something nesting in that bush, you could potentially call the Wildlife Crimes Unit at the DEC, Department of Environmental
Oh,
Conservation, and they'd have to weigh in.
and
So yeah, because that would directly harm a bird that is basically breaking federal law.
okay, that's good to know. I have several nests actually that were falling out of bushes that were being reshaped by these landscapers, and some eggs that got destroyed from
Terrible.
2 and 3 years ago. I don't even know if the birds will come back this year. Um, but yeah, I will somehow get in touch with you to find out more about these laws and numbers to call.
Yeah, the DEC has a wildlife crimes hotline, I think. They report it. I'm not sure what region Valley Cottage is in, but they should respond relatively quickly. Or if not, it's always good to just kind of like have that information out and show
Mhm.
that this should be protected and maybe put up like some um, fencing or something around that site.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Okay, thank you so much. I
All right.
appreciate this whole presentation. Thank you.
Laura,
Hi, I just had a question. You were saying about turning off lights at night. What time periods, I mean, are most significant? Are this a migratory start from the dusk to dawn or?
Yeah, great question. So migration, I guess to start at the season of migration, migration happens from really March 15th through the end of May. So that's spring migration. Fall migration is a bit longer. It goes from August 15th through November 15th. Spring migration is particularly bad for light. Its birds seem to be very attracted. Well, I guess during both seasons. But the key time to turn lights out is really from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So there doesn't seem to be, it's not 100% in the science yet, but that period of time, like shortly after sunset to about 11 p.m., there doesn't seem to be that big of an influence of artificial light at night. There is some, but it's as birds are kind of getting oriented and taking flight. So if you can target between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., like set a timer to shut out then, that's great. Um,
And
and
does the
then,
intensity of the light matter? If you have a lower intensity light, is that less of an impact?
yeah, absolutely. So I shared one of the images I shared of it was actually done at McCormick Place, another convention center in Chicago, looked at light intensity over time. And direct intensity does lower the number of impacts of collisions. It also lowers how much impact is happening around it, right? You're going to attract fewer moths, which are also bird and bat food. You're going to attract fewer other insects. A lot of this decline of birds is happening because of kind of an insect apocalypse that's happening right alongside of it. So lower intensity is better. Also, if you have to, well, I guess it wouldn't work for a residence, but one of the reasons that you see like on top of bridges or communication towers, those flashing lights is because if you can get lights off, it does break that trance a little bit for a little while. But really, if you target 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., you're good. And try to avoid all forms of uplighting. So if you have a uplighting, meaning like a spotlight that's directed upward, because that is something that's expanding out to the environment, attracting a lot of wildlife into it. If you have a light and you can cap it so that the bulb is kind of covered fully by the exterior barrier and just lighting directly beneath it, that's the best form of lighting there is. And if I remember, I could send some lighting recommendations from colleagues.
Thank you.
great, thank you. Sheehan,
Hi, thank you. Um, Dustin, I'm curious what the enforcement is for New York City for light violations with the code that they have in place. I'm asking because in Nyack we are working to Rockland or Orangetown, of which Nyack is a part, actually has a fairly robust ordinance in place for light trespass. But it seems like the enforcement of that code is patchy at best. So I'm curious what sort of enforcement New York City has to make sure that things are abided by.
Yeah, and it's nice to see you, Shane. Good to see you. The legislation for lights out that we currently have is about city owned or occupied buildings. So it's not for local residences, so there really isn't any enforcement rule other than just a government order for themselves. It's supposed to be phased in. So this year was the first year that, I think it was this year, maybe it was last year, 25% of the buildings were supposed to have lights out in place. And it gets phased in gradually to 100% in 2030. So that's for the state level. Um, the way that the bird safe building legislation is enforced is through permitting. So a permit for a new building, because there is actually some enforcement mechanism there. A permit of a certificate of occupancy, getting people to go into the building, isn't granted unless bird safe glass is used. So that's kind of how it's used to get buildings that are being built out, or if a major retrofit is taking place where all the glass is being replaced. In terms of light trespass, not too sure. Some of my colleagues at American Bird Conservancy may know. So if you send me an email, I can connect you with them because they're working on legislation across the US, and there might be a good example somewhere. So oftentimes it really does help to have something that's already in place to help design good legislation.
Okay, maybe we want to take just a couple of questions from the chat, and then we'll go back to folks that have their hands up. Let me see, we have Jeffrey confirming buildings in Atlanta that have the glass. Victoria asked, how can we get legislation around motion sensor lights? Are you aware of any, Dustin? Or is anyone on the call perhaps aware?
You know, I think there's a lot of work going into this right now. So bird collision reduction is certainly having a moment. And so the Fish and Wildlife, even though they're facing all sorts of pressures, they began coordinating this group of people working in this space, not just on glass, but also on light. And there is some great legislation that's been proposed as that. I would say that approaching that sort of legislation doesn't have to be any different than any other legislation, where go in and show the data on why light at night is so impactful, why it's so bad. And it's not just about birds, it's about other wildlife, it's about bats and insects and plants. It's also about humans. There's been data that shows, or studies that have shown, that if you have lights on, if you have light trespass when you're sleeping, you have higher rates of things like cancer, or lower rates of ability to get well after you're sick. So light at night is really not good for anyone. And I think that if you go in with a kind of a robust case showing how impactful artificial light at night is, then you're going to have a better chance of getting some legislation in place that requires those lights to go out.
Okay. And Peggy chimed in about lights affecting other wildlife as well, for sure. Christine, you put a note about building for birds. Did you want to say something about that as well?
Sure. I'm Christine from Rockland Audubon Society, and thanks so much for coming, Dustin. It was very interesting presentation. What I put in the chat before, Sheann, who just spoke like a few minutes earlier, she's going to be presenting at New City Library next week on basically how to like put paracords on your windows. So it should be like very informative. So please come out and join us for that. And one more thing I wanted to add before we wrap up or take more questions. I just wanted to mention one simple thing people can do to help birds, because birds, they need habitat everywhere. And one of the easiest places is in your own yard, or if you don't have a yard, it could be like your own porch. Adding native, as Dustin was saying before, adding native plants, a water source, and some natural cover can make a big difference. And Rockland Audubon has a bird sanctuary program where residents can certify their yard as bird friendly and hopefully inspire neighbors to do the same. So just out of curiosity, does anyone here already have native plants in their yard or on their porch? Raise your hand if you do. So if you're interested, I'll put our bird sanctuary link in the chat.
Great, thank you, Christine. Jacqueline, go ahead.
Just one really quick on one thing that was mentioned about the bird savers. Ethiopian bird savers are a really great product for home use. So I'm glad to say that's going to be the example that you're hosting at the library. With bird savers, because there's a 3D element of like something that can hang down and sometimes move, what's been shown is that you don't need the 2x2 spacing. 4-inch spacing works because there's some sort of 3D element. So it's a really good solution if you don't want to have a 2x2 barrier or sticker on your glass. It's also one of the cheapest and incredibly effective.
Okay, Jacqueline.
Yes. Hi, I'm Jackie Drexler, and I'm actually sister of Jocelyn DiCrescenzo. And so I'm so glad Christine is on, because Christine, a couple of years ago, Christine tried to get our condominium to do butterfly, habitat garden which got totally decimated by the scrapers. So it didn't really turn into what we wanted it to turn into. We would like to maybe do that with an area that's a little bit bigger that maybe the town would do, right, Christina? It was
Yeah,
an idea.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
the thing is, like right now, like condos, or at least, the condo where we are probably condos in general, it's not really meant for bird-friendly life, like at this point in time.
so what I wanted to say, I really applaud Christine's efforts, and also that she was really instrumental in getting.
And
I didn't know if the Tappan Zee Bridge lights are off all the way off or just dimmed, but
they're dimmed. Yeah.
yeah. So I just think that's fantastic, and but I also wanted to say, it's interesting. We live up in this huge condominium complex with 1,000 apartments, and when I go to the town board meetings and I'm complaining about overdevelopment, they always say to me, "Well, Jackie, you live in a condominium which decimated the birds." And it's true. This entire complex used to be a bird conservancy, from what I understand. And so it's really hard during COVID. Birds started coming back because there was less traffic, less lights. But it's so hard in really overdevelopment areas to try to get anything accomplished. We do hope, I guess, that our county government will do what they can for their buildings and for their areas surrounding their buildings. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah, Jackie, like I think there would need to be more laws for condos. No.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
good luck with that for us. Okay, but thank you. This has been a great presentation, and I cannot wait to get involved in your saving these birds that come up the river that you showed pictures that almost look like a little baby ostrich. I'd love to get involved in this plan. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to help. And then
Thank-
again with that condo, I mean, I think you'd be shocked how many people are birders around you and how many people care. It's really one of the things that did come out of COVID. It's so many more people started looking at the environment around them, and that's led to more advocates like all of us. So engage your neighbors in it, and the more voices, the more we can shift away from that sterile landscape to something that's beneficial.
Always good advice. Connect with your community, talk to your neighbors. Peggy?
But also I would add to what Sarah said and what Dustin just said, that connecting people with the environment through things they love, I think is
Mhm,
really important.
mhm.
And I think that's what's so great about birds. I just wanted to, first of all, to thank you very much. Excellent presentation. But also to say one of the things I found most powerful was the video, the two little videos, and the one where the birds are clearly very disoriented.
Yeah.
Really very, very powerful. So I guess a question and then a suggestion. So does the color of the lighting make a difference? Is it, I've sometimes read warmer colors like yellow or red, or no, that's bad. I just don't know.
The science is still out on that. There hasn't been any really good evidence to show that one color light is better than the other for birds.
Okay.
So what does make a difference though is the intensity and the duration. So if you can get a stop a light from burning all the time, like maybe like a flight light on top of a communication tower, if you can stop that light from burning constantly and get it to flash, that's going to reduce the number of collisions and the number of the birds that are drawn to it. They're not responding the same way to a constant glow.
Interesting. And then my suggestion is, Christine, wherever you are,
Yes.
I want to suggest that we work on extending the Mario Cuomo Bridge policy to the other bridges, go back to the Thruway Authority and say, look, it's been a year. It's worked out really well.
Mhm.
Maybe talk to them, maybe even send them that little video of the birds disoriented. And
Mm.
I think it's so powerful. I
Yeah,
just, no
that's an
brainer.
interesting idea. Like Dustin, on the New York City bridges, do they do anything yet or not yet? The
No, not yet.
the
No, yeah.
mm,
I would like to be able to point to what you all accomplished at the Cuomo Bridge to get more engagement around the New York City bridges.
The other thing we can do locally is the county and the larger towns. And again, Christine, I'd be glad to, I'm sure Sierra Club would be glad to partner with Audubon on this. But some of the larger buildings, some of the larger towns, like Clarkstown has a lot of buildings. I'm sure the lights are on all night long, even though I haven't checked that out, but I'm sure it is. And the county, we could work. There's now a Climate Smart Communities Task Force. Maybe we could do it through that.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. But when you were saying before all the bridges, like what do you mean by all the bridges? Like
The
all the bridges,
throughway authority bridges.
all throughway and you
Yeah.
within all New York State or no?
Yeah, throughout New York State. Why not? The same as, unless there's some physical reason why they can't dim it overnight, you know?
I mean, are they so throughout New York State, are they all bright? Like, because like here with the Cuomo Bridge, we had the problem that it was really too bright. But are all the bridges too bright like that?
That's a good question. Why don't we talk offline?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to
Yeah,
deep dive
yeah.
on that, and I want to
Yeah.
be conscious of everyone's time. Uh, I did have one question in the chat, was a question, Dustin, about impact of avian flu and what impact, if any, has that had on the bird population?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure you've all seen some of that impact. Bird flu is ravaging the birds in our area. Um, I am in contact with the Department of Health regularly about birds in New York City. We have large wading bird or water bird populations that winter in the city. Maybe you escaped a little bit of the impact this winter because it was so cold and much of Rockland froze over. But bird flu is like human flu in that it's a cold-loving virus. So it does better in cold conditions. It spreads easier. You combine that with winter conditions where water freezes and birds concentrate in the small areas where there's not frozen water, and you are incredibly prone to spread. So last year was particularly terrible. This year was maybe a little bit better, at least in the Hudson Valley, not in New York City. But just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen a major uptick. Apparently, Pennsylvania and Western New Jersey have been getting destroyed by it. So it's very present. I hope this warm weather breaks it, right? It's always going to go down and decrease the frequency of it. What you can do is, provide habitat, give water birds space. If there's water, if there's areas nearby, this is mostly affecting water birds and raptors. Passerines seem not affected by this. There's very few cases of bird flu showing up in passerines, the songbirds. But waterfowl and raptors that tend to eat waterfowl are getting impacted by this the most, as well as corvids, the crows and ravens. So what you can do is kind of make sure that people are giving waterfowl space. Protect your animals too. If you're going to go out to an area that has a lot of goose droppings or other waterfowl droppings, don't let them eat anything that spreads that way. Try to wash off your feet before you bring it inside. To try to reduce the spread. Don't walk through areas with a bunch of goose droppings and go to another area that could then spread that way. I know this year we're planning our harbor heron surveys, those surveys where we go out to the islands every year and conduct those counts. We didn't do the surveys last year, the full surveys. We did a presence absence by boat. We didn't do it because we didn't want to risk ourselves and the birds by contaminating them. Bird flu is reduced enough this year, and those wading birds don't seem to have it. So we're going to go out there and do it this year, but we're going to be wearing full PPE. They're going to be wearing goggles and masks and a full suit, which we haven't had to do in the past. But it's for our safety and for their safety. If you do see a sick or injured bird, you can report it to the state DEC. They are collecting samples. If you see a bird that's on your property that's dead, not a passerine. If it's a passerine, it hit your glass or got killed by a cat. If it's a water bird that's dead nearby or local park, if you can call the park, see if they can remove it. But if you have to remove it, wear gloves and triple bag it and throw it out in the trash. That's the best recommendation. You can just throw it out. But it is important to get them out of the local system because when they sit out there, they are sources of spread of things that go near them or birds that show up to eat them. So call the park or call the DEC first, see if they can remove it or test it. If they say we're not getting out there, try to bag it yourself. Just wear gloves and wash your hands. Wash your hands.
And one last question. I thought it was so powerful to see the transformation of the Javits Convention Center roof. Do you know offhand, or does anyone on the call know offhand, if there are grants or you mentioned the tax abatement, but are there grants to convert large, flat roofs like that? I think of, the Palisades Mall and, places like that would be great if they were converted to green roofs.
I don't know of any state grants. Um, there is a DEP grant, New York City DEP. So if you happen to be near a property that abuts a reservoir for
Oh.
the New York City DEP drinking water, there's a grant program that New York City DEP will cover the entire cost of your green roof to be installed for stormwater capture. The reason it has somewhat low uptake is that there's a restrictive covenant that you have to promise to take care of that roof, I think, for 20 years. So that limits some people, but it still gets used. Outside of
Good.
that, I don't really know of too many, but they are really great. They provide habitat. They stop stormwater overflow. They reduce urban heat island. So many reasons to install a green roof.
All right, so I think I'm going to wrap up this section of our presentation, spend a few minutes just touching on other topics of local interest. You're welcome to stay, Dustin, of course. But actually, if Laura Cosvar is still on the call, I'm just scrolling down.
Thank you all for having me. I'm going to put my email in the chat.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you who are asking for the presentation, we will, of course, we recorded this, we'll post it on our website and share the link. So again, thank you so much for participating, Dustin. I did have some good news in terms of the recent approval by the New York State Board of Regents of a new statewide K through 12, grade 12 instructional requirement for climate education, which is something that the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force, CRETF, has been advocating for many, many years. And Laura, who was on this call earlier, I guess she's dropped now, was one of the activists who made several trips up to Albany advocating for this, along with CREPT and other organizations, National Wildlife Foundation, other groups. So it's nice to get a little bit of good news every now and then, so that the next generation is educated about climate change. I did want to announce again briefly the save the date on the CD17 Candidates Forum. That's Monday, April 20th at 6:30 for the Sierra Club Candidate Forum, and it will be totally online. And then I wanted to give Jackie Dreschler, assuming she's still on, a moment perhaps to talk about the advocacy around CLCPA and helping to preserve
Right.
the targets
Yes.
there.
I am still on, and thank you for this opportunity. So on March 25th, there is the Defend the Climate Law. It's a big day up in Albany, multiple organizations going up to let Governor Hochul know that she needs to defend the climate law, not weaken it. And it's possible that I have 4 people, including myself, who want to go by bus. If we can get 10 people who are willing to go by bus, Food and Water Watch will make a pit stop for us at Parking Lot J at the Palisades Mall. And so 10 of us lucky people can get on a bus up to Albany to be part of that huge rally. I also wanted to say on March 25th, we also have a meeting with the Orangetown Planning Board. There's going to be a review of the data center that is in Orangeburg that wants to do a large expansion. So for people who don't go to the Defend the Climate Law, maybe you'll come to the Orangetown Town Hall, to the Planning Board, to have information about what's going on with this data center. That's at 7:30. And actually, I do believe that Food and Water Watch, I think Melissa Hoffman is going to be also attending that. Food and Water Watch has been in touch with the Data Center Crisis Coalition. So we'll be getting some help there. But it's really, I'm encouraging people to come to that too. We really need to have people fill that room. Unfortunately, it always gets filled and they never move to a bigger room, but it's important. And then the other thing I'd really like to talk about is, and I'm sure everyone's heard about it, and this actually could be very much affecting what's going on in the Hudson River and the birds as the canary in the coal mine. So this past week, Congressman Lawler, Department of Energy Secretary Chris Wright, who is wrong, and the CEO of Holtec International, Mr. Singh. And by the way, the word Holtec stands for holistic technology, which is incredible to me. But they announced that they're going to be reopening Indian Point, and Governor Hochul has said no to it. But should this happen, you know, and actually for nuclear power all over New York State, the pollution that gets probably into people's homes, into their lungs, into their bodies, into the water, the radioactive waste affects all of us and affects the ecology of the river and the wildlife, including the birds. So we need everyone hands down in this fight against it, not only for Indian Point, but for all of New York State. So I just wanted to bring that up too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Can I
Uh,
ask a quick question as a follow-up to that? Has anyone heard anything about what they're going to be doing with the nuclear waste that they had been talking about dumping in the river? If you know any.
Well, yeah. So back about 2 or 3 years ago now, we got something passed called the Save the Hudson Bill. The New York State Legislature passed it and Governor Hochul signed it. And it was to stop this company, Holtec, from dumping up to 1.3 million gallons of waste into the Hudson River. And we got that stopped, but then Holtec appealed that. And then a judge sided with Holtec and the federal government that they have the right to dump. And so Letitia James, who's the Attorney General for New York, is appealing that decision by the judge. So right now we're in a holding pattern. The amazing thing is, considering Governor Hochul signed that, and actually that even Congressman Lawler was instrumental in getting that passed because he did support it in a quite a bipartisan way to not allow Holtec to dump. Now they all want nuclear. So it just boggles the mind. But right now it's just the lawsuit is in a holding pattern. We don't know what the outcome will be. Thank you.
Okay, Peggy, anything you wanted to say before we wrap up this evening?
No, I think this was good. I'm not.
All right. Again,
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody.
We'll make the link available, and for anyone who couldn't make it this evening, or anyone who wants to go back and look at the slides and video, etc. So thanks.
It was one of the best meetings ever. It was really fantastic. What a great presenter, and thank you.
Thank you again, Dustin, if you're still listening.
And thank you, Christine.
And thank you to Christine as well for partnering with us, and Mid-Hudson Sierra Club and ROAR, Carol D'Angelo.
I would just add, it was so good to see. I'm not feeling well physically. It was just so good to see things that were uplifting, that were inspiring, not just the negative. So
love those little eggs in the nest. There's hope. There's hope.
Thank you all. It was a good
all right. Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.